Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Human AF podcast. This is episode 7.
Yeah.
Okay. We're losing track of the numbers, but whatever. This is episode 7. Today, we're going to be talking all about boundaries. But before we get into that, um, definitely be sure to go back and listen to the past couple of episodes because if you haven't already, of course, because each episode really does build on itself. And we want you guys to see the journey of like how did we get here to boundaries because it really we're trying to show you how we process and how we've gotten to this point so that you can hopefully go on your own human journey, human AF journey, of getting to where we have arrived.
Yeah, definitely going back to where you are more authentically you. And a big part of how you do that is by setting boundaries. And a lot of people, myself included, don't have boundaries and often don't even understand what they are, what
Yeah,
they
I thought it
actually
was a buzzword at first.
Yeah, yeah. So going back to episode 2, where we were talking about how to have conversations with people that can be triggering for yourself as well as for others.
Hmm.
And I think that is a great place to start with like boundaries. A lot
Hmm.
of people will, again, myself included, like everybody, will kind of go, oh, this person hurt us. I'm going to tell them they can't do this anymore.
Right.
But what we do when we like set boundaries is we're trying to control another person's behavior by saying, oh, you can't say that to me anymore. Versus what a boundary actually is, where we can't control, like when we try and control somebody else's behavior, we get really upset when they don't do what we tell them they can't do anymore, which then makes us mad and not them, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Whereas a boundary is actually, if you do this, I will do this. So the boundary is actually, what am I going to do if you do that again? So it's like, oh, if you say that, okay, I'm no longer having a conversation with you. I'm going to remove myself. And that's that. That's the
Hmm.
boundary, is what actions am I taking, which
Right.
may or may not change their behavior, but it keeps your peace. And it's very uncomfortable to do with those triggering relationships.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. As you're talking, I'm just sort of picturing I almost have like a flash reel of all the people that I've had to set boundaries with in the last year or two. It's just like what's that word? Like a movie reel of
Yeah,
people
yeah, yeah, yeah,
in my
yeah.
head, of all the people that I've had to set boundaries with, and it was triggering for them when I set those boundaries, and it was even more triggering for them when I held on to them.
Yeah,
Um,
yes.
like when they realize, oh, she's not just saying this, like she's freaking serious, and like they're like these are rock solid boundaries. And as somebody that is not used to setting boundaries and really is not used to being assertive, it was triggering for me too to set those boundaries, and to hold on to them because I have been a lifelong people pleaser.
Yeah.
And so setting boundaries is almost inherently going against that. But the reality is that like I know we can get into this. I'm like kind of going off the deep end here, but bear with me. The reality is that like people pleasing is not my nature necessarily. It's just how my value, going back to values, my value of wanting to make people feel loved and seen and heard, that's how it manifested because I was shy. But now that I've been able to rewire myself and like put myself as like the like it's okay that I set boundaries. And it's okay that I choose to prioritize what I need first. I'm no longer a people pleaser because like what I'm realizing is that like I'm like I don't think people pleasing is something that like is who we are, right?
No, it's a response.
It's a response. That's what I'm trying to say. And so I think with boundaries, it it can be triggering for everybody involved, but it's so worth it on the other side.
So worth it. And there's a quote, I can't remember what exactly it is, but the gist of it is basically the people who are upset with you setting boundaries are the people who were using you in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So that ends up being the people who sort of like push back
Mm-hmm.
and push back for quite some time. They don't just like respect it. It's because they have their own stuff, but you do need to hold those boundaries firm because the boundaries are for you. Those boundaries are for you to find your peace and become more you, like relearn who you were or who you are without the people pleasing. Because the
Right.
people pleasing is a response because you're not feeling seen and heard, and you're trying to demonstrate through your actions, oh, this is the way that you should be treating me, which I'm showing you that I love you and I want to hear you and I want to see you and I want to, tell me everything. I'm going to be this perfect person so that you can actually see me. And it doesn't work that way. People will use you like crazy until you set that boundary for yourself and to yourself. Like the boundary
Mm-hmm.
is to you, it's not to them. Like
Right.
it's for you to change your behavior. It's for you to change your thoughts. It's for you to do to yourself of going,
Mm-hmm.
no, I'm going to choose differently, which then is going to become, it's going to feel better for me.
Right. I like that. I think I love that you said the boundary is for yourself. And I think that's really like such an important thing because I think for me, like being like the introverted former people pleaser that I was, or I'm still an introvert, but I'm not a people pleaser. I found it easier to set boundaries within myself first,
Mhm.
and then to like set boundaries for other people. But like I was always doing it for me either way. Like boundaries were always there. They were always there as like a benchmark for me to improve my own life, you know? And so what I mean by that is like before I was able to really set and hold boundaries with like family members or people that I work with, I had to learn how to set boundaries with going to the gym before I sit on social media, or even like when I'm at the gym, like not going on social media. Do I break that boundary sometimes? Maybe. Um, but just learning to like to establish that and learning to like build trust within myself. So another example is before I go to bed at night, like the whole apartment has to be clean. Like that's a boundary that I set for myself. And once I started to do that for myself, I started to find it easier to set similar boundaries that I needed to have towards other people. Because like you said, it was all about like this boundary is for me and not for anybody else. So I'm curious if you had a similar experience or if it was like sort of the opposite for you.
It actually was opposite for me.
I had a feeling you're gonna say that.
I went big. I took the hardest boundary that needed to be laid with people
Hmm.
and people that were using me and push back, still pushing back. And that was the first time I'd ever known, like truly learned what boundaries are. I think we do set boundaries without realizing that we set boundaries, but they just don't impact us. Like we don't
Mhm.
really notice them. Uh, but the ones that we do notice are the ones that are like, oh. And
Mhm.
for that, the only reason I was able to maintain the boundaries are because I have people in my life now that are there where I can go to and be like, oh my gosh, walk me through this, hold me through this while my emotions go up and down
Mhm.
as this person is pushing against my boundary. And
Right.
all I want to do is control their behavior, because if they would just act appropriately, this would all be like the boundary wouldn't need to be there. I think that's the
Right.
big thing, is the boundary wouldn't need to be there if that person's behavior changed. But we cannot change somebody else's behavior. And
Mhm.
it a person can only change if they want to change, and they have to go through their own little micro awareness integration changes in order to get to the bigger changes that grow over time. So boundaries are
Mhm.
for us to protect our peace as the people around us go through their own journeys. And sometimes people hit their rock bottom, or they hit their, oh, this behavior is not okay, or I need to change because somebody in their life put in a boundary where they, and it caused them to turn around and look at their own behavior. So sometimes the hard boundaries that you have to put and walk away from people, love them from afar. I'm literally learning that whole love from afar thing like this week, what that fully means.
Mhm.
uh, that can literally be the catalyst for somebody else's journey
Yeah,
to become
absolutely.
more yeah, for sure.
So I want to say two things about that. One, can I offer you kind of a reframe about like
Oh, please.
the um so you said something there like the boundary wouldn't need to exist if the other person would just change. And I get that feeling so bad, but like I kind of so bad. It's okay. My coffee hasn't hit yet. So I get that feeling like so well. Um, but I'm wondering if maybe the boundary still does need to exist regardless of how the other person acts. It's just you're not feeling the pressure and the tenseness of that boundary because they're not pressing up against it. Like, so the boundary is for you and it exists for you no matter who is on the other side of it. The only time that, like, you're just feeling the tension because they're pushing so hard up against it. So, what do
Yeah,
you think about that?
yeah, yeah. I understand what you're saying. I see what you're saying, and I completely agree with what you're saying. The boundary, at least some of the boundaries, absolutely are so much healthier. My
Mm-hmm.
life is so much healthier because I have those boundaries with
Right,
myself,
right,
because I see my worth more.
right,
They would need to be there regardless of this person, their actions, even any other people.
right.
And yes, they do get tense when people push up against them, because I think it's the external validation is when
Mm-hmm.
someone's pushing up against your boundary, where then you're feeling, especially as a people pleaser,
Mm-hmm.
codependent empath type of people, you can start to question, oh, am I a good person? Am I being mean for doing this? So your
Mm-hmm.
boundaries do need to be in place. That tension can cause you to second guess until you really integrate. No.
Absolutely. Yeah, and the other thing that you were saying too is like when people set boundaries, like when people set hard boundaries, it can be a catalyst for change. And my brain just went boing, like as you said that, I was like, oh my goodness, yes. Like the number of times that I have been catalyzed, is that a word? I
Sure,
have
well,
been I have been catalyzed to change because somebody else set a hard boundary for me. Um, I mean, I could honestly like even like small changes, huge changes, like they often do come from other people setting a boundary and making it clear to me that my current behavior is unacceptable. Um, and so I love when people set boundaries with me. I used to get really triggered and defensive, but now that like where I'm currently at, I actually am like, oh, wow, like thank you. Like
yeah.
just yesterday actually, I was going back to the example of using my phone at the gym, which sometimes I do. It's still it's a journey. I'm not perfect. I'm still learning. Um, Yesterday I sit down in my spin class and my friend texting me and I like responded her. The class had already started. And the guy next to me says, "Hey, like, can you put your phone down?" And he's like, it's really distracting and the instructor works really hard. Like, please put it away. He's really nice. And that was the boundary. Like I was encroaching on his 45-minute workout. I was encroaching, is that we're just gonna assume it's a word. Just bear with me, guys. This is my vocabulary today. It's not great. Um, I was, interrupting this experience that the instructor gave that was trying to create for us. And I was really just interrupting the whole class by being on my phone. And so this guy set a boundary. I put the phone away and I had the best freaking workout that I've had in weeks because I didn't look at my phone once. And at the end of class, he looks at me and I could tell he's about to apologize. And so I stopped him and said, thank you. Like, I needed that. Like, thank you. And he was shocked. He was like, wait, what? You saying thanks? I'm like, yeah, like I need to be called out on my own shit. So thank you for setting that boundary. Like I had the best workout. Um, and that's just a small example, but I can think of a million other examples where somebody was like, you can't talk like that, or like that's not how you can be supportive as a friend, or like, you know, the way that you're acting is like just ridiculous. Like, and I used to get really defensive, but now it's like it's an invitation to look inward and say, okay, like, am I being out of line? Like, what can I shift? What can I change? And sometimes, I don't actually need to change. I was just maybe having a bad day or like just had a bad moment. But sometimes or more often than not, it is an opportunity to shift the way that I'm looking at things and shift the way that I'm doing things and shift the way that I'm interacting with people.
Okay. Something came up
Mhm.
for me.
I love it. That's why we have this convo.
Okay, so in the beginning of this episode, I sort of went over what I used to think was a boundary and what I learned was actually a boundary. And I think this is where I got confused and where most people get confused. Because in your story, you talked about how this guy approached you and said, can you just put your phone away? So he was asking you to change your behavior and
Mm-hmm.
you complied, which
Mm-hmm.
was fantastic because you recognize that. But that's where I feel like, okay, if you hadn't changed your behavior, what
Mm-hmm.
would he have done? Because it still would have been distracting for him. So when we talk about boundaries, or like where I used to think a boundary was, is I'm requesting somebody else change their behavior. And when they don't
Mm.
do that, I get angry because I made the request. It's perfectly reasonable. What the heck? And that's where I used to get frustrated because people weren't changing their behavior. And it
Right.
took a lot of me being told and explained and shown that it's actually, that's not the boundary. The
Mm.
boundary is, what do you do if you make that request and somebody doesn't change? What do you do as a result? And it's not like, you just go and yell and scream at them. It's,
Right.
what behavior change do you do? So
Mm.
for him, so if I can just use this example, it's, he makes the request
Mm-hmm.
to test out, do I need a boundary here? Hey, your phone's really distracting. Would you mind putting away? And you're like, you could say yes, put it away, and then 5 minutes later, pull it back out. Or you can just be like, no, this is my phone. How dare you make a request of me? Like, this is ridiculous. Well, him, he's like, this is distracting to me. This is impacting me. So I
Right.
made the request. Fine. It's still ongoing. The boundary to me is I'm going to switch to a different seat.
Right.
So then that keeps his peace. Otherwise, he just gets really, 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 really mad and ruins
Mm-hmm.
his own experience in that spin class
Right.
because of your behavior, which he cannot change. But by him moving, and it's him moving has not like it's just neutral. Whereas you
Right.
might go, holy crap, he just moved. Like you can take that as like, oh my God,
Ah.
this guy is so ridiculous, blah, 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 where you then become that defensive
Mm-hmm.
mechanism versus going internally, which would be, oh, geez, he made that request of me. It was really, he was very polite, he was kind. I just kind of ignored it. I can go inward and go, ooh, yeah, you know what? I have this goal,
Mm-hmm.
he's, this is the universe sort of validating evidence, like I, need to put my phone down kind of thing. So you can go inward and have a completely different outlook on what that interaction was. But
Right.
his boundary, the test for the boundary is, do I need it? Which is making the request. Your response tells him, do I need the boundary or not? And his boundary is actually
Wow. Okay.
that.
Interesting.
That's the like
That's the
that took
missing
me
link.
so long to understand because of that rage, I guess, that internal rage
Mm-hmm.
of a child. Because boundaries, when you look at boundaries as an adult, the people that respond and rage against them, including ourselves, is that little child having a temper tantrum. And it's the parent that goes, no, you can't put your feet on the table while we're having dinner. If you keep putting your feet on the table while we're having dinner, I'm going to remove you from the table. Okay, it looks like you need help. I'm going to remove you. Like you pick them up and remove them. And every
Right.
time you keep doing that, you keep doing that, you keep doing that, you keep holding it, and they rail and they rail and they rail until finally they stop. But you just hold that boundary.
Mm.
Like,
Interesting. Wow. So, okay. So, what about people that are listening right now that are thinking, okay, well, now I understand that the boundary must move with the person setting it. Like, it must, like, the person setting it is responsible to make their situation better, right?
yeah, yes, by not
However,
controlling anyone else.
by not controlling anybody else. However, like, if that guy had moved, or let's say I'm that guy and I moved because he's like, this girl is she for real? Like, she's not putting her phone away when I asked her nicely. So now I move. I'm putting myself, like, I'm inconveniencing myself. So how do you reframe that as, no, I'm just protecting my peace. Like, and I don't have the patience to deal with this girl.
Okay,
Like,
what's your priority? So is your priority to enjoy the class? Or
or
would
to
you
be right.
and be like just angry over this person who's distracting you from the class? Is it truly an inconvenience to move? yeah, it can be frustrating of like, why couldn't she have just put her phone away? I was so nice about it. Like now I have to move and I have to be inconvenienced and I have to find a new seat. But then you're still angry over somebody else's behavior, which you cannot control. You can only
Mm-hmm.
control your own behavior, which is moving, and you can control your thoughts, which are, I want to enjoy the class. That's why I came here. You neutralize somebody else's response. So you see how there's positive and negatives
Yes.
for both people involved. You can
Right.
absolutely set that boundary with yourself and move.
Mm-hmm.
You also have to deal with the mindset of victimhood,
Mm-hmm.
where you then are still allowing that person to have power over you by
Mm-hmm.
labeling that interaction as negative and still giving them the power to ruin that class.
Right. So by putting the phone away instantly and not like becoming an asshole, did I remove the need to set a boundary or did I just okay, I
Yeah, you
get
did.
it now.
Yeah.
Okay. Or I just removed the need to have him. Yeah, I guess he didn't have to establish a boundary. That makes sense.
Yeah. And
Wow. Okay.
he helped you reinforce your boundary with yourself, which is to
Mm-hmm.
reduce your social media use or your screen time use.
Okay,
So
so he didn't have to set a boundary of his own, but he's helped me set my own boundary for myself.
keep your own boundary because you've
Keep
said
my
it.
own boundary. Yeah. Wow.
Like,
That's
isn't that fun?
crazy.
Isn't, but look at how that reframe happened. When we walked through the different emotional responses and physical responses you can have to a boundary, and you can look at it as, what is this mirroring back to me? What is this reflecting back to me? You can look at that experience and go, it's reflecting back to me choosing myself again, which is reducing my screen time, and look at what it brought me, a really awesome opportunity. And your interaction with him might have completely changed his view about something. It might have, the fact that he was about to apologize to you and you were like, no, 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 that was amazing. That was awesome. Like you could have completely shifted his world a little bit too,
Oh
which
yeah, we were
is fun
talking
with him.
after, right, and we ended up talking after class for like 10 minutes about our dogs. So like I don't know, for all I know, like he's probably like, oh, this stupid like 30 something, 20, like because I look like I'm like 17. Like this this child, like I'm so sick of Gen Z, blah blah blah. Like maybe he went home and was like, I had a great interaction with this, like I don't know how old she was, 18, 19. She actually put her phone away. Maybe Gen Z isn't so bad.
Yeah,
I don't know.
they never know, but boundaries are a good thing. When you put them in place, they're like a physical behavior change.
Hmm.
The hard part is the keeping them when people are pushing back, because there are people that will have that sort of temper tantrum and continue
Hmm.
to try and push them and manipulate them, and it could be like they're super sweet, or they could be railing. The biggest challenge can be that mindset of victimhood,
Hmm.
because the way society is built is on victimhood, where we give our power away to the external.
Hmm.
So boundaries are a great way to set them with yourself, to take your power back and
Hmm.
put it back on what brings me the most peace. What story can I tell myself that makes me feel the happiest? So we go back to the previous episodes, the layering of the previous episodes kind of comes, and you see how boundaries integrate all of that. And the hard ones can feel so gross to hold. So
Hmm.
gross to hold. So get a buddy. Get somebody that you can go, help me rewrite this story. Help me talk through these feelings, like hold space for me to talk through these feelings so I can rewrite this story. Make sure I end the conversation with a rewritten story where I feel powerful in in holding it.
Right. Wow. Yeah, how can this boundary, either me setting it, me holding it, or somebody else setting one, and somebody else holding it, how can I look at that as just a change to my story? Like it's like we're
In a positive way.
rewriting the narrative. Yeah.
The positive way. I love that you brought up somebody else holding a boundary to me,
Mm-hmm.
because I think that's also a big one too, is there could be people in your life that put up a boundary where they won't take your crap anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And that's also, okay, what is that mirroring back to me? So you can
Right.
take it as a learning opportunity of what what are they not liking about my behavior? And is that something I need to go inward and look at? Or is that more of that, like, what is being triggered? What is coming up for me? Why am I upset that this boundary is being held against me? That's an opportunity to go inward and go, what am I feeling? Am I feeling abandoned? Am I feeling like, why? Why?
Mm.
It's boundaries are, oh, they are just the greatest learning opportunities to come back into yourself. And
Yeah.
they can be hard, but oh, find the silver lining and rewrite that story because it feels so much better, and find a buddy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the key takeaway here is find a buddy. But also like, yeah, like you said, find a silver lining. And I mean, this is just my crazy brain. Like just I'm almost picturing boundaries as like silver linings. Like if you try to
Yeah.
visualize it, like that's what
Yeah.
they
Oh, I
are.
love that. Like put yourself in a little cloud with a silver lining around it.
I'm
You
so
describe
glad you
boundaries.
understood where I was going with that.
The two steps, we get each other.
If anybody else understands, let us know. Um, I think that's a great place to wrap. I almost feel like maybe we'll do a part two of this conversation because I think it's so important.
Yeah,
Um,
more conversations, there's going to be a deeper level of boundaries.
yeah,
I was so excited for this episode.
there has to be a part two. Let's do a part two. We've
Yeah,
just decided.
yeah.
Um, so we are going to continue this conversation in the next episode, I guess. You just heard it here first. Um, but if you absolutely love this episode and you want to support us, be sure to like it, rate it, review it, share it with a friend, tell a friend about the podcast, and of course, follow us on our socials. We are currently on Instagram at humanaf_podcast and Threads at humanaf_podcast. And we absolutely love you guys, and we can't wait to continue this conversation in part two.
Yeah. And if you guys have any situations where you would love to know what the boundary would look like, because this can be tricky sometimes, shoot us a message. Shoot us a message,
Mhm.
and maybe we'll do sort of like a little anonymous review on an episode of, here's an
Mhm.
example, here's where you can set, or how it looks to have a boundary in this situation. So drop us
Ooh,
a line. We love hearing from you.
yeah.
And we'll do maybe some anonymous help here.
Yeah, ooh, I like that. We could do like an episode where it's just like the Bean Squad speaks.
Ah, ooh, I
Yeah.
love that.
Something like that. In the next episode, we'll be sure to touch on what Bean Squad is.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. All right,
Um,
guys, this was fun. Definitely follow us everywhere. Drop us a comment. We love you guys very much, and I guess we'll see you next time.
see ya. Bye.